Welcome. We're super glad to have you. Lark Sprint 2 was a great sprint. We got a lot of stuff accomplished, and I'm excited to go over that with you. What we hope to accomplish in Sprint 2, and that's what sprint we're on, was an initial standalone platform where we can create, edit, and retrieve authority records. We did achieve this goal, and we're currently waiting to deploy. And I think, and Tom will correct me when he demos, I think we're set to deploy either today or next week. The milestone that this sprint was supporting was the first milestone, which was to have an initial standalone platform. So we did achieve that milestone. We're just waiting on deployment right now. So the accomplishments of this sprint was to sketch an event log specification, to add, edit, and retrieve authority records, to update authority records, to do a batch update, to add Robocop. Robocop would be pretty cool too, but I think it's Rubocop. Add integration test. We set out to accomplish all those things, and we did get through them, which was really great. We did burn really fast this sprint. It was very exciting. It's nice because the first sprint was kind of truncated with code for lib. So now we got to really see the team in action and kind of get a better idea of our cadence. We also did a lot of pair programming this session, which I thought was great, and got through a lot of tickets that were a bit harder for the team to accomplish individually, but did really well when supported. I think what's on deck for Sprint 3 is a little more complex and nuanced. We have Starlight coming up against a deadline, so Lark is going to take a back seat this sprint, and we are going to get through some things. We have some scheduling issues with our SMEs. A new librarian is joining, yay! But that means we need to free up one of our SMEs to onboard that person. So it's going to be a big documentation week and a deployment week and some discussion, but not necessarily as much deployments as we did this week. I don't know what there is to demo. I never do. Tom always assures me there's something to demo, and I'm always surprised. So I'm going to let Tom take it over.
You've really backed me into a corner here. I was going to punt on the demo and instead talk through what we have done, because I'm those of you who were here 2 weeks ago or whenever we did that, a week and a half because of the conference. Will recall that the last Lark demo was a command line interaction with the HTTP URI. And while there are certainly things to demo, the setup for them is rather elaborate from the standpoint of I'm going to run them on my command line in front of you. So I'm not going to do that. And instead I'll say, we made a ton of progress. So last time we were demoing, just basically we can create authorities and get them back, and there wasn't much data attached to them. So we've built out during this sprint the model that we got back from the content side early in the sprint. So we've built that out so that the data that actually needs to be attached to these authorities can be. We've built out update so that you can, once you retrieve the data back, you can send updates. And we've built out batch update so that if you've got 50 or 100 or 1,000 authorities that you need to update in a single request, that's a thing that you can do. Those are the main functional things. And again, just setting up the JSON and sending the curl requests is kind of cumbersome. One of the things that we're thinking about is what, at this point, is what the workflow will be now that there's basic CRUD operations in place, what the workflows that we need to support will be, and what kind of infrastructure is needed for those. So it's likely that there will be some kind of front end, but those kinds of discussions are happening starting in the next sprint. What else? I think Jessica pointed out that there was some DevOpsy kind of stuff and some process stuff. So we got a style guide in place for the dev team. A big back end thing that happened or is happening today is more accurate, is that we got Solar built into our development and CI process. So that's the back end for the index side of Lark is in place. And when we do the initial deploy, which is hopefully very soon, we're expecting to include the Solar component in that process. There's a second backend for this system, which handles the event log. The basic model is that updates to authority records are captured as events, and then those events lead to index data, which is read optimized. So those events are going into Postgres, and that's work that's slated for this next sprint as well. What is there anything else? I guess questions are probably good.
Any questions about the Lark product, what we accomplished, or what we're planning on doing for the next sprint? Okay. If you need to drop off, feel free to. I know that this was a time change for my Lark stakeholders. We won't be offended if you have to drop off. And then I'll turn it over to Chrissy for Starlight.
Hi, everyone. I realized it's always good to just have a reminder. I think everyone on the call knows what Starlight is, but because we have some new folks joining us this week, I just wanted to remind everyone that Starlight is just our local, is the UC project surfliner name for our local customization of Spotlight. And it follows our train naming theme for the project, which is super fun. And it also, talks well with that. It plays well with the Spotlight name. So for those UCSD stakeholders that are on the call, and you know what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to share the board with you just so you don't have to stare at nothing. So can you all see that board? Okay. So for those of you from UCSD or on the call, you may or may not be aware that UCSB actually has a pretty big deadline that's coming up related to Starlight. Before we embarked on the Surfliner collaboration, we had made a commitment to our special collections and outreach departments that we would have Spotlight up in production by the end of winter quarter. And so that is the end of next sprint. And so really this next sprint, there's sort of that sort of contextualizes some of the work that we've been doing up to this point. We do have a need also to be able to ingest PDFs as exhibit objects as sort of part of that commitment. And so really to put that into perspective, of the goal of our second sprint was to get the Starlight code deployed to both campuses' local staging servers, set up support with single sign-on with Shibboleth, continuing work on uploading and displaying PDFs as exhibit objects, and improving our test suite. And like I said, this is supporting our first major milestone, which is to have an instance of this Spotlight Starlight platform in production for both campuses. So our accomplishments of Sprint 1, we had a major blocker, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But I first want to talk about our accomplishments because despite that blocker, we did a lot. We built an initial implementation of authentication support for Shibboleth. It's not yet deployed to staging like we hoped, but we do have that functionality and configuration in place for us to do so. Related to the major blocker we've had, the big issue is that we are struggling with the UCSB campus IT to get Shibboleth set up on the UCSB side. And so what we're doing at this point is keeping a database authentication option in place, just in case we can't get that set up by the beginning of sprint 3, so that we can meet that deadline of having something deployed for UCSB into production. So that's been a major blocker for the team. We have at this point brought in John to help us clear that blocker, and then we also have this backup plan. So we're pretty confident that we'll be able to get it resolved, but that is a major thing that has been blocking the team's work. But we also have been sort of looking forward to this needing to deploy in 2 weeks, so added the ability to generate sitemaps for the application upon deployment, which triggers a ping to major search engines like Google and Bing to go ahead and crawl the site. We've added the ability to integrate Google Analytics into a Starlight application by supplying the necessary configurations. We built a Solar Docker service that we can use and share for both Starlight and Lark, and this allows us to do continuous integration testing in GitLab for both projects. And this was a joint Starlight and Lark effort. We also upgraded the Starlight application to Rails 5.2, which is the most current available stable version. And this included migrating the test suite, along with a variety of other configuration changes, which prepares Starlight for an eventual upgrade to Rails 6. We also continued work on setting up support for native PDF objects as exhibit objects. Because we haven't deployed this, we haven't been able to test these. So a lot of this work is already is essentially completed, but we just haven't been able to close out those tickets because we haven't been able to confirm in the local environments that that's functioning correctly. The one sort of major thing related to PDF objects that we need to be addressing during the next sprint is how Spotlight deals with creating derivatives of those to be used throughout the UI. So Matt, is there anything anything that you want to add at this point?
No, I think the only other, maybe subtle things I would add is there has been ongoing work at trying to extract some of the UC Santa Barbara specifics that were built into the application as far as configuration goes, and make those more dynamic, so that whether it's San Diego or Santa Barbara or whoever else would like to deploy a Starlight app, they can configure things the way that they need for their servers and their environment. So there's still ongoing work happening on that. And to just echo what Chrissy said, there's just a general push towards production for Santa Barbara in particular right now. So we're working on trying to get everything that would need to satisfy production needs for Santa Barbara in place right through the end of this sprint and heading into the next sprint. So that's definitely the focus right now.
Thanks, Matt. So like I mentioned, we didn't really set out to accomplish everything during the sprint that we wanted to, primarily because of this major shibboleth blocker. But since we have our backup plan and we have additional help pulled in, we are confident that we'll be able to at least move past that blocker and get something deployed by the end of sprint 3 into production for UCSB, and also deployed to staging for UCSD, if not production. So we are going to be working a bit during the next sprint on things like branding. Matt has already accomplished a lot of things having to do with like the analytics and the sitemaps. But what we are sort of looking forward in terms of the stakeholders is we do want to, at this point, we have sort of an initial list of requirements that had been assembled from both campuses quite a while ago. But we know that you all haven't really had a system to be working in. And so what we're hoping to do is actually get you those environments so you can start using them, playing around with them, and being able to give us feedback about what's missing, what you'd like to see. The other thing I mentioned during our last sprint review is we have been in communication with sort of the core Spotlight development team to see if there's a roadmap for the larger community. There isn't one, but there is a desire to create one at LDCX, which is going to be taking place during Sprint 4, I believe. And so I'm really hoping as the product owner to be able to bring that information back to the stakeholders and share that with you. And then as a joint group, look at that and also look at the requirements that we've already captured from the campuses and sort of recalibrate based on our knowledge of the community and our experience working in the system. So are there any questions for any of us?
All very promising. Chrissy, thank you so much for the update.
Thanks, Roger.
Yep.
So if there aren't any questions, I'm sorry, there hasn't been a lot to show off. I'm hoping at the end of our next sprint demo, we'll actually be able to show off a little bit more and also get everybody into their local systems and start being able to play with them and actually do some work in them. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.